About 20 years ago, a movie came out that left an impression on me. I remember thinking it was particularly redemptive. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's called The Cinderella Man. It tells the true story of James Braddock, an Irish American living in New Jersey with his wife and children. And he's a light heavyweight boxer. And he actually gets pretty good. But at a certain point, he breaks his hand and some other injuries that he has to give up fighting professionally. Story plays out in the 1930s, the Depression era. And so James will do anything to get work. He's working manual labor, but some days he can't even get a job. But then by a stroke of providence, someone who's supposed to fight the number one contender for the title, the championship, has to back out at the last minute. And so James is asked if he wants to step in. And he does, and he pulls off this miraculous upset. That's where he's called by the journalist who gave him this, the Cinderella Man. Spoiler alert, he actually goes on to win the championship, huh? But there's this great moment where he's at this press conference. He went from obscurity to now like popularity, front pages of the paper. There's many reporters out there asking him questions, his wife sitting next to him. And he said to them, they said, "What's different about you this time?" And he said, "The difference is, this time around, I know what I'm fighting for." And one of them says, "What's that, Jimmy? What are you fighting for?" And he says, "Milk. To put milk on my table for my children." Like it's that simple. To fulfill my vocation, to provide for my children. Like it's desperate. I'm fighting for milk. Now I thought of this because today's gospel, in a particular way, wants to shine a light into sometimes the obscure darkness of our heart, to really allow ourselves with authenticity to say, what am I fighting for? Another way you could say it is, what gets my attention? What am I anxious about? What gets the deepest energies of your heart? It's a really important question. Now, I want to walk through some beautiful truths, life-giving truths that Jesus tells us in this gospel, but just context. This is the first of 4 Sundays in a row that you and I will be listening with the whole church throughout the world to the 6th chapter of John's gospel. We'll just be taking it in sections. It's called the Bread of Life Discourse. And if you're not super attentive, you might come next week and say, didn't we just hear this gospel? There's a lot of repetition, and there's a reason for that. But today begins it. And so it lays some very foundational realities. The first would be, why are you here at Mass? You might say that's not in the gospel. Well, he does say when they find him, why are you looking for me? Do you know what the very first thing Jesus says in the Gospel of John? To the 2 disciples who follow him, he says, what are you looking for? And they say, you. And then he says, come and see, and they spend the whole day. Well, now, there's crowds that are looking for him, and he wants to say, why? You know, it's really a temptation to want to subordinate our relationship with Jesus, our following him faithfully, to some other useful means for ourselves. I don't know, maybe at times we can live faith as an insurance policy, just in case. Or we say, well, Jesus, it's like a subtle bargain. I've been trying to be faithful, and how come you haven't done this, and the other thing in my life? Don't get me wrong, Jesus says to us explicitly, seek, knock, ask. He's interested in all the details of our life, and he wants to bless us. But ultimately, you know what faith in Jesus is about? It's about the ongoing choice to surrender our lives to him. Like, I'm not the center of my existence. I don't even know what my existence is for unless I surrender my life to him. And then it's light and meaning and depth and authenticity. And I have to make that choice again and again. There are certain big moments in our life, aren't there? I'm sure you can point to some in yours where I have to say, I surrender my life to you. And why do I do that? Because I trust you. And you're the creator and I'm the creature. You're the savior, I'm the sinner. You're the master, you're the teacher, I'm the disciple. So that's the first thing Jesus wants us to say is, I really want your heart, I want your life. He says, you're not looking to me because I worked a sign and that's going to bring you further along, but you're like, if I keep this guy close, I'm always going to have food. And he says, be careful. The second thing he tells us in this gospel that's so important is that all your activity, all your work, what you give your energy to is secondary. He says the primal reality is the work that God is doing. And our lives are never more alive, filled with color than when we're in sync with what God is doing in our lives here and now. Now, the first thing that requires is some kind of spiritual perception. Some willingness to stop all my activity and to sit before God in silence. My activity is not that important. I need to let it down because otherwise I don't even know what my activity is for. I have no idea if I'm in God's will or my own project. You know, this last week, Father Sean, Father Sam, and I were with 35 other priests. We take an annual conference together. So we were in South Dakota. Wonderful time of friendship, fraternity, recreation, learning. But we had a speaker who came from a seminary in California, wonderful man, Dr. Anthony Lillis. And the point he kept driving home to us, remember, all my brothers, like myself, for the most part, we're in parish priesthood or we're in seminary life. There's a lot of administration. It's just part of ministry. And the thing he kept telling us, it is that unless you press into contemplative prayer, like 2 hours of intentional silence before the presence of God, your ministry will be shallow and superficial. So yeah, I can preach and I can maybe draw good insights from Father Schmitz and maybe weave them together and maybe it serves you. But ultimately, God won't be working through my heart to touch your heart. And it's the same in our own lives, brothers and sisters. Like, unless we have this daily habit of prayer where we say, it doesn't feel like anything's happening in my prayer. Well, yeah, he's active. You know, it's interesting. An author made the point that in creation, God worked 6 days and he rested the seventh. And he commands us to stop our activity and rest. But then he says when God goes about recreation, redeeming the world he created, it's almost like there's no Sabbath for God. He's always working, Jesus says. So I want to surrender my life to him, and I want to surrender my activity, which can actually just be so much gas. It can be so much gas if it's not rooted in the gracious will of God. What is he doing here now? You've heard me tell you that all the time. Like, it doesn't matter what projects or programs we have. It really doesn't if it's just our project and our program. And would that he would open the eyes of all of our hearts to just, Lord, you're at work. What are you doing? Second thing, work of God, is St. Paul does say we do have to kind of be intentional about taking off the old self and putting on the new self, putting on Jesus. He says the old self is like an earthly way of thinking. It's deceitful desires. He says if we put on the new self, we're alive to Jesus' desires in us. And you know, every day, it's humbling. I know for me, it's just humbling. You're like, am I still dying to that part of myself? Are you kidding me? I thought I took that old self off a long time ago. But when we do that, we make space for him. Okay, third and final thing. They're starting to get it. You're going to see in these 4 weeks, you know, they're like, okay, we don't just need our bellies to be fed. Sir, I love how they start, sir. They're not getting something. Give us this bread always. And he says, I am the bread of life. Don't know if you know this, but this is the first of 7 I am statements Jesus will make in the Gospel of John. You know some of them. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the light of the world. I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. But he starts with, I'm your sustenance. I'm your strength. You know how St. Paul defines faith? Living from the strength of God. Living from the strength of God. You know, I've been privileged to accompany some wonderful lay people these past few months, and they don't know each other in different ways, have reached this place in their vocation that is very dismaying, where they just feel no resources or energy to love their spouse or their children or be generous or do what they know they should do and they really want to do. They just feel like, And I've been trying to encourage them to say, that is a holy place. Right there, Jesus wants to prove himself in your life that he's strength. It might be that you've just come to the end of yourself. No more self-reliance. Jesus, you be my strength. Sometimes, you know, we say he's our Savior, but we can live our days sort of like, Jesus, I'll let you know if I need your help. And then we just go about our own plans, you know. And he's our Savior. He's our sustenance. He has us pray in the Our Father, and he doesn't even put a please before it. Father, give me today my daily bread. Give us our daily bread. I can't live without Jesus. Not even for a day. Not well. Not being fully alive anyway. Now, the next 3 weeks, we're going to go into a little more of the mystery of his real presence in the Eucharist, like a particular way he's the bread of life. And maybe just to get you thinking about that, there's a lot of recent data out of how many Catholics actually believe in the real presence. You know that when the bread and wine are consecrated, it really, truly is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. We're not receiving a symbol. It's stunning. And I don't know, we could be scandalized, we could be disappointed. It just is. This is the reality. But if I don't learn to surrender, to bring the deepest hunger of my heart to Jesus, well, then maybe I never will encounter him in the mystery of his presence in the Eucharist. Maybe it'll just be a nice ritual that, I don't know, gives me some kind of hope for the week. What if I learn to bring my deepest need and hope to him? I'll close with this, but this man speaking to us last week, he said, what ultimately is faith? What is it? He said it's to behold God with a vulnerable heart. I thought, okay, I can do that. I want to do that more. I don't want to live from my own mind. God is always greater than my mind, than what I can think. He's greater than my self-reliance. He's greater than your plans. And today he invites us to say, lift up your heart. I got so much more for you. You are more than you know yourself to be. And I'll meet you, and I'll be your strength. It's almost like he's saying, just watch me. Just let me in, and let's live this beautiful life together.